Hey everyone, I'm going to talk about my journey creating a relatively simple Flask app and the things I learned about privacy and ownership along the way. But first, a little bit about me. My name's Carey, and I'm a developer advocate at Google Cloud. I like really good fan fiction and really good food. So first, we're going to take a look at what's going on in the world. What were some huge data breaches and what laws were created to give users more power over their data? Second, we're going to look at a Flask web app I made. It's not pretty, it's not very compliant, and I may have done some frowned upon things around ownership while making it. And finally, we're going to take a look at how I fixed up my app, made some small changes, and got it on the path to compliance. And I'll also reflect on better ways to handle ownership. I just want to give a heads up. I am not a legal or privacy security expert. I'm just showing how I improved certain aspects of a simple app to make it more aligned with new laws. This talk is more about making little things aware to beginners that they can easily look over. Let's take a look at some huge data leaks in recent news and what regulations have been put in place to protect our data. If you do a quick search for PII breach, chances are you're going to see a lot of hits. But let's talk about a couple of the big ones. So first, there's Coffee Meets Bagel. That happened in 2018-19, and 6 million usernames and email addresses were breached. And unfortunately, that happened on Valentine's Day. A little ironic for a dating app. Georgia Tech had 1.3 million users' data breached in 2019. Info was stolen about current and former faculty, students, and staff, and even applicants. The database held names, addresses, social security numbers, and birthdays of all these people. That was their second data breach of the year, too. So, not very good luck. And one of the biggest ones, Marriott International, 500 million users' data leaked in 2018. And 5.2 in 2020. So all the guest information that was leaked included names, email addresses, phone numbers, loyalty account numbers, and account balances, company names, and even airline loyalty programs. And that's not even the whole list of everything that's leaked. With all these huge leaks in the news, you're probably wondering if you've been a part of one. And actually, you can check it out, this link here, haveibeenpwned.com. I put my email address in there a little bit ago, and I found out that 2 web services had been breached that I use. One was an interior design website, and the other was a popular fanfiction site that I've actually visited like maybe twice. I'm actually kind of surprised that number wasn't higher, but maybe that's a good thing. There have been 2 high-profile regulations that have come out in the past few years. The 2 that I'm going to be focusing on are GDPR and CCPA. GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. In the 80s, computing was starting to be used to process personal data. So in 1984, the European Council held a convention. This set out guidelines for EU members on what is wrong and what is right. From this, the UK created the Data Protection Act 1984. After the 80s, usage of computers and their availability grew a ton. The EU got together for another convention in 1995 and made the Data Protection Directive. This set a higher standard around the protection of individuals with regards to the processing of personal data and on the movement of the data. Then the UK enacted the Data Protection Act of 1998. Then comes 2012. The internet is bigger than ever. Social media is booming. The European Commission proposes a comprehensive reform of the EU's 1995 data protection rules to strengthen online privacy rights and boost Europe's digital economy. They pretty much wanted to make it fit for the digital age. This right here is the start of GDPR. It's a 4-year journey getting the approval votes and coming to an agreement on the GDPR's approach. In May 24, 2016, GDPR is go. It replaces the Data Protection Directive from 1995. But Commission isn't heartless. They give everyone 2 years to meet their regulations. It's now up to the companies to take all the steps necessary to ensure compliance with this new 260-page data protection law. And finally, in 2018, get compliant or get a fine. So what is GDPR? Like I said, it's a 260-page data protection law containing 99 articles and 173 recitals. But who does it affect? Companies who have websites that process EU citizen data. And you can't really control where people are coming from to your website. So it's basically a global thing. Big companies can't escape these regulations either. British Airways, Marriott International Hotels, and Google have all been handed some big fines. But what is it protecting? It's protecting your personal information. Individuals have the right to access their personal data. When requested, companies need to let users know what is being collected and, when requested, also how it's being used. The right to rectification means the user must be able to request that inaccurate information about them be updated. On the other hand, the right to erasure means that the user must be able to delete their data when requested. The right to restrict processing. A user can request that their data stop being processed, but the company can still store it. The right to data portability. This means individuals can request companies transfer their personal data to another company. And the right to object. This means the user can object to how specific types of data are being processed. A type of process would include marketing. The CCPA is a law designed to protect data privacy rights of citizens living in California. It forces companies to provide more information to consumers about what's being done with their data and gives them more control over the sharing of their data. It's protecting user data. Most consumers don't realize that their personal information is being shared or sold to others. This makes sure they're given the chance to opt out of having their information used in a way that they disapprove of. Now let's take a look at some rights the CCPA grants. They might sound a little familiar. First, users have a right to request that a business disclose the specific pieces of information collected about them. Although many online businesses already disclose the general sources and purposes of their data collection through their privacy policies, you need to inform users specifically about what types of information is being collected about them. Access and portability. Companies have to give users copies of their data if they request it. The right to opt out. Users now have to opt in order to have their information be sold. And the right to delete. A user can request that their information be deleted from a company's database. All right, so now we're on to the good stuff. Let's talk about my super awesome, not horrible at all Flask app I made. And maybe you'll be able to see some issues with it. I'm not sure, but we'll see. Here is my PokeView app, and I'm going to show it off to you guys. It's pretty cool. So we got the option to sign in or sign up. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new account. For username, I'll make it Hi Texas. The email can be test@gmail.com. And then the password 12345678. Yeah, super secure. So let's go ahead and sign up. Okay, account created. So let's go ahead and try and get in there. By Texas, and then 12345678. Sign in. Okay, so that was our account creation and sign-in flow. And then once you're in, looks like PyTexas has no Pokemon caught so far. So we just got like a Pokédex here. And then I can like click on Pokemon, pop it open, and that's it. Then I can sign out. Yeah, so that's that app. Now let's take a closer look and give you a little more context on what's going on with my app here. For my first Python web app, I decided to create a simple Pokédex. It includes the following features: user account creation and persistent sign-in, a Pokédex for each user, the ability for users to toggle and store the catch status of Pokemon, and automatic scaling with App Engine once it's deployed. All my Pokemon images are URLs that are scraped from some Pokemon database site. I just embedded them in image tags. I didn't want to right click and grab the URL for each of these Pokemon. So I created a Python script to just scrape them all. Once I got their URLs, I had my app embed them in my templates, tables, image tags. Here's a behind the scenes look at my database. It uses 3 tables. The first table holds all the Pokemon my app supports. For now, it's just the original 151. The second table holds all my users' info, emails, passwords, things like that. The third table is how I give everyone a profile. It stores every user Pokemon pair. For example, 2 users can both catch Pikachu. These 2 catches will be separate rows in the database table. When it comes to signing up, I have a pretty straightforward form. Once the user signs up, they get added to my super secure database. Here's a quick look at my user database table. I'm in there, and it looks like someone else signed up too. Oh, and it looks like they are very creative with their passwords, just like me. Good to know. Now it's time to see some fixes I made. How am I going to go from being an accidentally, unknowingly bad person to being a good person? So to recap, here's what I messed up. There's probably a bunch of other little things, but these were the big ones. We're going to take a look at my database. Something didn't look quite right there. We're also going to look at how the login experience can be improved. There's also cookies. GDPR is crazy about cookies. You've probably seen a million of these cookie pop-ups all over the place, but my website doesn't have one. My site also didn't have any legal notices. I think most websites have those too. Finally, we'll take a look at some ownership mistakes that I made regarding scraping and things like that. But before we dive into all that, I want to show you all my new app, new and revamped, and with better graphics and functionality. So, upon opening it, I'm greeted with this banner at the bottom of the screen, alerting me about cookies, and tell me to check out the privacy policy. So if I go check it out, okay, looks like there's good stuff here. And then I'm just going to click OK. Let's go back to that. All right, so instead of that sign in and sign up flow, now I have this big button, sign in with Google button. So I'm going to click that. And now I can select one of my Google profiles. I'm going to go with this one here. And I'm in. I didn't have to put in my password for my Google account because I'm already signed in. So that's cool. And now I have over here, looks like I have a profile. Yep, and I have a profile picture and a big ID. And looks like an updatable name field. I'm going to go ahead and change my name to Abby C. Update profile. Let's go check the Pokédex. Looks like Abby C is updated. All right. I can sign out, delete my account. That's new. And there's a notice down here about how I can get my data. Cool. So, delete. Cool. Well, that's my app. Let's take a closer look at the changes that were made and the issues that were fixed in the process. If you're going to store user passwords, you gotta hash them. A hacker would have a field day if they got into my database. With all those non-encrypted passwords in there, it's just too easy. It's actually super easy to do though, and overall my database has taken a step in the right direction. I use the workser.security library to get password hashing. All I needed to do was update my sign up and sign in routes. If we take a closer look at my sign up form, I use the generate password hash function to take the password field of the user, hash it with SHA-256, and then store it in my database's user table. And now let's take a look at my sign-in route. When a user signs in, all I need to do is use check password hash to hash the password the user just entered and compare it against the hashed password that's currently in my database. So hashing a password is a good first step. Encrypting is important to being GDPR compliant. But what if I took things even further? The safest database is the one that doesn't have anything worth hacking into. I decided to completely remove all references to email addresses and passwords from my database. But how did I do that? Well, I implemented OAuth sign-in. You know those login with Google or Facebook buttons, like this one? You click on that button, and then you select your Google account to sign in with. So what's OAuth doing behind the scenes? An OAuth client within an app requests an access token. The OAuth server then verifies the client, gets the user's consent, which was where I picked my profile in the last slide, and returns an access token. The app can then request resources from the server, like a user's info. After the resource server checks that my token is valid with the OAuth server, it then returns the resources my app requested. OAuth is an open standard for authorization. It's used as a way for users to grant websites and apps access to their information stored at other websites. This means that with OAuth, I can log in with my accounts that I already have with existing big companies like Amazon, Twitter, and Facebook. I don't need to create an account. I'm just going to use the one that already exists. Instead of sending a username and password to the server with each request, the user instead sends an API key ID in secret. Having a site that prompts you to enter your username and password directly into a form is bad practice and is known to be an anti-pattern. Here's what it looks like when implemented. What's awesome is that I was able to build on my existing Flask login code to get OAuth added. I use a library called auth-lib. It supports a bunch of different clients, including Flask. It uses OpenID Connect to get a user's info. I only implemented sign-in with Google, but it's really easy to configure others like GitHub and Twitter. From my homepage template, I used my big login with Google button to kick off the sign-in process. I create a Google OAuth client and then redirect them to a Google authorization route. To authorize, I create a Google client, authorize the user's access token, request the user's info, and then finally store that info for my session. Now I've gone from storing usernames, passwords, and emails to just a Google ID and the user's name. I didn't even have to store the name though. In fact, I probably shouldn't store the name. I can remove that because with OAuth, info like name and email can be accessed directly once a session has been established. As you saw in my code snippet in the last slide, I don't need to store it. I can just get it by requesting the user's info from my Google OAuth client. So I do need to store the ID though, so I can keep track of what Pokemon they've caught. This is okay though, because this ID is already obfuscated by Google. Cookies can store a lot of personally identifiable information. Because of this, they can identify you without your consent and are therefore considered personal data. This means GDPR cares about it a lot. Websites can use them to gain insights into a user's online activity. For example, marketing cookies track your online activity to help advertisers deliver a better ads experience to you. These cookies can share that information with other organizations or advertisers. A less violating use of cookies is for statistical reasons, like Google Analytics. The information these cookies store is anonymized, but GDPR still cares about them. My app uses a session cookie to know who's logged in. This is generated by my OAuth package I just talked about, auth-lib, and Flask login. This type of cookie has been classified by GDPR as a strictly necessary cookie. Strictly necessary cookies are cookies that must be present for the website to provide its basic functions. They are essential for accessing features of a website and could include signing in, adding items to a cart, or e-billing. While I don't have to get a user's consent before using these cookies, GDPR does say I should explain to the user what a cookie is and why my app uses them. I also keep my privacy policy link sticky to the bottom of each page for easy reference. With my app, I've gone the implied consent route, which is allowed. This means I give the user a one-time heads up when they first visit my site, and then that's it. I use the site to generate a privacy policy, and then I link it in the footer. And here's what that one-time pop-up looks like. I went the simple route, as you can see. It's not too beautiful. It was a pain trying to figure out how to do this with Flask. After a lot of research, though, I found a snippet that did the trick. If a user clicks the link, they're taken to my privacy policy. There are a bunch of generators out there to make a policy like this. If you don't have a legal team to make you a policy, one of these might fit your needs. You can also take a look at other privacy policies on other websites for inspiration. To add this banner, all I did was add this cookie banner check to my base template file. If a user has pressed OK on my cookie banner in the past, don't show it. Once they press OK, though, I execute code to first set a cookie called cookie consent to true and hide the banner. But what about this cookie check? This bit of Flask code injects a new variable into the context of my template. It returns a dictionary that can then be used by all templates in my app. For this cookie check, I see if the user has pressed OK on my cookie banner in the past with request.cookies.get. Cookies check is then equal to true if the cookie consent key is set to true. The cookie check value is then used to show or not show the banner. After pushing OK, if I later take a look at the cookies of my application in the browser, I can see my cookie consent cookie is there and set to true. My initial app's login experience stored email addresses and passwords in my database. As a part of these new regulations, I needed to implement some way for a user to update their info in my database, and also delete it if they no longer want to be in there. My old design had no way for a user to view the information I stored about them, so I fixed that by giving everyone a profile view, as seen here. From here, I made updating their info easy with a form. I needed the ID to stay the same, though, because that's what I use for login tracking. I also added a delete my account button to completely remove them from my database, satisfying the right to erasure clause. To cover the right of portability, I took the easy way out and decided to add a sentence at the bottom of the profile page. I gave them a way to contact me to get their data. I could have added a tool to my site to create a downloadable file for them to get their info, but this covers the bases for now. And finally, it's time to take a look at some ownership issues I encountered. I mentioned earlier that to get all the images in my app, I decided to scrape their URLs and embed them in image tags. It was a great idea. Scraping, which sounds pretty fishy, actually does not violate the CFAA, Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It's definitely a gray area, though. In 2019, LinkedIn tried to cease and desist a company that scrapes LinkedIn profiles. LinkedIn lost because the court determined the CFAA does not apply to information available to the general public. If I can access a site without having to log in or anything, it's fair game to scrape. Sites can still thwart web scrapers with things like CAPTCHAs, though. I think LinkedIn recently changed things, so you have to actually log in to view someone's profile now. That would stop a scraper. Websites usually have a robots.txt file. This file tells search engine crawlers which pages or files the crawlers can or can't request from your site. This is used to mainly avoid overloading sites with requests and taking them down in the process. Here's an example of the robots.txt file from PokemonDB.net. Besides telling scrapers which pages or files you can or can't request from your site, this one also specifies a crawl delay, which I didn't see. These restrictions are just suggestions, though. To be a good netizen, you need to respect and follow the robots.txt file. Most of the publishers allow programs to crawl their websites to some extent. So to sum up scraping, read the robots.txt file, don't scrape from disallowed sites, and make sure you add a crawl delay if specified, which I didn't. All you gotta do is add a sleep in there. Turns out scraping all those URLs and embedding them in my site wasn't something a good person would do. I found this out when all my images suddenly turned into something like this. Hot linking is when you embed a resource on your site that's hosted on someone else's site. This is bad because I'm eating up someone else's bandwidth every time I serve the images on my site. So instead of potentially hogging all that bandwidth, I did a one-time scrape and downloaded all of the images and stored them in my database. Now I'm being a good person at the small price of probably less than like $1 a month in cloud storage fees. So I'm getting a lot of I'm using a lot of Pokemon images in my little app here. The website that I got all my images from, PokemonDB.com, actually uses the fair use doctrine. The fair use doctrine permits limited use of copyright material without having to first acquire permission from the copyright holder. Things can get pretty complicated pretty fast with the fair use doctrine, though. So what does it take for your use to be considered fair use? How you use this copyright material matters, including whether such use is of a commercial nature or for nonprofit educational blog post purposes. To be determined fair use, 4 principles are looked at. So you think you have a good intent and positively meet these 4 distinctions? Well, now how do you get your hands on that piece of paper that says your use is fair? Well, you don't. The only way you can determine if your use is classified as fair use is if you're taken to federal court. A judge uses the following principles to judge whether or not your use is fair. These are just guidelines, though, and a judge has a lot of freedom to make the fair use determination. This makes it hard to predict the outcome of a court case, if you do get taken to court. As an example of something going wrong here, fan-created games have been taken down with cease and desists in the past that were previously under the fair use doctrine. Let's take a look at that 4th clause there. One particular fan-made Pokemon game was super popular. When it got too popular, the company that owns the IP, Nintendo, sent a cease and desist, even though the game was free, and because it was, taking up market share. My little dinky app is just a database with some pictures. It's basically a verse version of PokemonDB.com. I'm not generating any cash with ads. I'm not a threat to the Pokemon market. So the moral of the story about fair use, your safest bet is to ask for permission from the copyright holder. Without their permission, you're running the risk of getting into some legal trouble or sued. In the end, a judge says your use isn't fair, then you're out of luck. So yeah, these are the first big steps I took towards getting my little app aligned with GDPR. While creating this app, there were definitely some mistakes on my part that could have been avoided by having user information as one of my top priorities. It's really easy to forget or just not know how to make your website compliant with laws that are constantly changing. It's also pretty darn difficult to make a website airtight to hacks. Overall, the purpose of the regulations are to make you make conscious decisions when processing personal data. It imposes best practices in a legal way. What we can do, though, is keep up to date on the latest PII news and try to stay as far away from storing personal information as possible.